Warning: the following contains explicit language and subject matter that may not be suitable for younger listeners, church folk, and people who enjoy kale smoothies.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to A Pod Amongst Men. I'm your host, Steve B., and this is Coffee Break Conversations for the 21st century. So, we're back. This is the second of two episodes that I completely botched on my save files, and either way, it's not the quality that I would prefer it would be, audio-wise, content-wise. Yeah, I thought it was a very good episode, actually. But yeah, so now that we're back on schedule, next week we'll actually get back to the level, the standard that I would like it to be at. But I'm not going to keep chewing your ears off here. This week, my guest is Mark Greene. He's the author of the Little METOO book for men. He has thought so deeply about some of the issues that this podcast is based upon that it would have been like a crime to not get him on here and hear what he has to say, because he's a smart dude. He's a very, very relatable guy. He comes to these topics from a point of personal experience, and I'm so grateful that he was able to take the time to talk to me. And I'm I'm so sorry that the quality is not up to snuff on my end. So this is totally no fault of his own. It's completely 100% on this end. But without further ado, here it is, my conversation with Mark Greene.
No, that's all good. Like I said, I mean, the more information I can get my hands on, the better. One of the things that's been crazy for me the last few weeks, my wife is pregnant now, and we just found out we're having a boy. So I have my stepson is 9 already, and I've been very close with him. So now with another boy coming along, I'm kind of like, all right, well, I got to skip the whole infancy stages with this guy, and now I get to kind of have a do-over.
How old was he when he first came into your life?
So I met my wife in 2015.
Do you want to hit record? We can just.
I'm recording. I'm ready to go. Like, this is all. Everything's good. So I'm getting all of this.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, cool, good.
Yeah, I would just let it go in casually. But yeah, I met my wife. He had just turned 5 when I met them, and we got married 2017. And then shortly after, the two of them moved up here to New Jersey from Miami. They're Cuban, so they live in it's kind of an insular community, Cubans in South Florida. And it was a big culture shock. But luckily with him, he's very similar to the way I was when I was a little kid. So I was able to kind of build a good foundation with him. We like nerd stuff.
You remembered that. You remembered that part of yourself?
Yeah. So a little bit about me, just since we're starting. I came from a divorced family. My parents split when I was 3. And my mom remarried the summer before I started first grade. So which is almost exactly the same time that I met my stepson. So we have a lot of like the same kind of upbringing. His dad is kind of similar to my dad. He's he's a very sweet kid. He's a little timid, like me. I don't know. I think he's actually sweeter than I was, but I was afraid of everything. And he's similar to that. But we like a lot of the nerd stuff. Like you have X-Men behind me, like comic books and anime and things like that. So we've been able to bond on that level, which has been really
fantastic. That's great.
Been very helpful. But he's 9. He's going to be 10 in January, and he's got his own personality now, and he doesn't always just automatically like the things I like anymore, and we're working through that.
Sure.
I'm trying to respect him as a person while still being the dad. It's tricky, It's they grow up, they're no longer your little kid. After a certain point, you can't just mold them. They are who they are.
Yeah, they're doing something that we call differentiating. They're literally, for a long time, it seems like they define themselves as an extension of us as fathers. My son's 15 now, and he's the child of divorce. I got remarried when he was 4. I'm the child of divorce. My parents broke up when I was 7. And so all of these stories sort of echo generationally for us, right? Like, what am I going to do for my son as a divorced father that maybe my father was unable to do for me?
Mhm.
And for me, it was stay in connection. It was be absolutely in connection, fully there. And I made it my mission to, even though for a while I was co-parenting back and forth, there were times when he wasn't with me. The way ours was arranged was not that I visited him once a weekend, he visited me once a weekend. Mine was he lived with me half the time. So and when he was going to school in the city I was in, and there was a lot of changes and moving around on his mother's part, we stayed put. But when he was with me, I got him up every morning and walked him to school for years and did all of that. And I think my goal was to let him know that he was loved and centered, and there was a container for him to be who he was becoming in my home and in my life. And they say that all a kid needs is one person who holds space for them. That's all a child needs. They're very resilient creatures, right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when they have none, when they have no one, that it becomes a problem.
You think just one? It really is that like it's a documented thing.
One person who is consistently present and aware and engaged. It's that simple for children. My wife is a couple and family therapist, and she often references that detail. And it tells you how many kids have no one, no one at all.
Well, that's for sure. Like I said, my wife's cousin just moved up here with her 16-year-old son, and he might be listening to this, so I should be careful what I'm saying. But, he's up here alone, essentially. His mom works, and, he's going to be starting in a brand new school. So I wanted to reach out. I'm like, you're not alone here. You can help out. We can help out.
Yeah.
You're not just flying solo now. But hopefully I can get him in here, and I could kind of use this. Maybe he could be like my apprentice, so to speak.
Yeah.
Give him something.
Sure.
I kind of wanted to be, I guess, like a mentor a little bit to him. Because I noticed, he doesn't have the best situation right now. He's got two older brothers that are grown, so they're not around. And like I said, his mom works. Like, who does he have then, if not for us?
Mm-hmm. This is what we do. I think as one of the choice points we face as men in the world. This question of what does it mean to be a man? Well, one of the things we can be as men is present for young men and boys who just need someone to model consistency and connection and maybe a little honest expression for them, to sort of see what that looks like. Because otherwise they're adrift. And the culture isn't very kind, collectively, you go into a new school, it's not a kind and welcoming experience. You get challenged to sort of prove who you are and prove where you are on the pecking order and all that stuff. All those challenges keep coming at you all the time, but there's not much connection initially. So.
All right. Can we pause for 1 sec? This thing literally just stopped recording. I don't, I'm telling you, I think I must have, I don't know. I must have broken a mirror somewhere and didn't realize.
Yeah.
Let's see. Where's my program? I'm going to try to change programs real quick. See if that works. Yeah, it started recording and then just kind of stopped like 2 minutes in.
Which program?
Adobe Audition.
Oh yeah. I have all those apps. I run Creative Suite on my Mac too.
Yeah, when I started this podcast about 2 years ago, I was just using a bunch of free software. I was using Audacity, and then with the update, I had it just stopped reading my microphone. So, I really was like, all right, well, I guess it's time to upgrade into a professional program like Audition. But now, because of the pandemic, and I don't have people in studio as often, I've been relying on Zoom pretty heavily. And apparently recording with Zoom and running Audition at the same time is causing some major issues.
And you don't like to record with Zoom? It's not working for you?
Well, the problem is that it loses the quality. Any better now?
Yeah, came back.
This is not fantastic. But anyway, I'm going to slide this right there. There we go. All right. You can hear me all right, though?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. So, thank you for doing this show.
The story for you. You're welcome. You can do the intro after this story and move this behind, whatever you want to do. But I had this.
I'll actually record an intro later on.
I had this big conference thing I had to do for a major organization, right? And they really had a great operation going. And what they did, they were so high tech that they shipped me out this portable sound studio, right?
Okay.
This big suitcase, you open it and pull these giant lights out, and there was a laptop and a microphone and all this stuff, multiple screens that pull. It was crazy, right? It's this big piece of gear. And we were each expected to do a TED talk, right? Like a 10 to 12 minutes, unbroken. You have to know what you're going to say, and you have to do the TED talk, right? For this system. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. I got this. And so we hook up this piece of equipment, which then starts in Zoom and then moves to this other software, which then routes it through a sound studio in Chicago with like a bunch of people with television backgrounds, right? It's like this big moment. And the whole system just wasn't working. It was not working. Like the clock on the Macintosh computer that was built into this thing was set for another time zone. So long and short of it is it was saying things like, no, I can't link to that because it's a time forward moment. And I'm like, well, I'd like to reset the clock, but I don't have the password. And the guy's like, well, I don't have the password. So we had this whole thing go on for 20 minutes. And my window was literally 45 minutes, right? So I would have had like 4 takes to try to do this thing right. So we chew through 20 minutes with guys like in Chicago remotely accessing my computer and patching in new code to the frickin' whatever, to try to get this whole system to work. And I'm watching them like pasting in code and then going over here and it's not resetting. Finally, the whole thing starts working. But then I'm like, okay, you got 1, maybe 2 chances to do this thing now. And you're all like, technology freaked out. And it worked, but I don't know how it worked that I managed to get on the second take. I finished and they said, that was great. And we're out of time. Goodbye. Click, and that was it. But so technology, internet conversations or recording or any of that stuff I think it teaches us to sort of like, in fact, in the same way that parenting is like, I have these plans and then I have parenting. And those two things never shall actually meet. They will not really actually align at any point.
It's very humbling, this whole experience, because I've seen even professional podcasters and content creators, struggle with the same kind of issues.
Yeah.
And, I was good.
Uncertainty, I think.
Yeah, I was good for a while. And then just lately, everything just kind of went to shit, for lack of a better term. Well,
tell me for a second, just help me understand how you come into wanting to talk about this conversation. Is it from the parenting space or from the masculinity space, or what's going on?
Well, it's kind of from everything. So this podcast was created to talk about all things related to manhood and just men in general, like our daily lives.
Yeah.
I wanted to approach it in a way where it's kind of digestible and relatable for the average guy, the working man.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of times we talk about this stuff and a lot of it goes over people's heads, or people feel like, well, that's not me, like for instance, like I spoke to Cleo Stiller for her book, Modern Manhood. And I was briefly in there, but as I read the book, there's a lot of really great information on great points, but it seemed to me like a lot of it was, especially when it came to workplace things, was kind of aimed at the corporate, the office environments. And I feel like the majority of guys out there don't work in offices or in a corporate setting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot. I'm a construction worker, for instance. So none of that stuff really applied to me,
Yeah.
And I'm like, how can we talk about the same issues, the same pressing things, like the way we view masculinity, the way we teach our kids, the way we view our own identities about this? And how can we talk about that in a way that guys get, and that guys will actually listen to and not kind of tune out and be like, yeah, okay, whatever, just being preached to. Like, I don't want that. I wanted it to be Like the way you give your dog medicine, you wrap it in cheese and kind of sneak it in there, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I want to make it fun, and it's like a good episode of the show Scrubs where it's funny and silly, but there's a real message in there, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to come at it from that approach. And like I said, I read your book, you know, leading up to this, and I was like, you know what, I would love to talk to this guy. I don't think I'm ready yet. Let me get a few more in the bank. You know, this is going to be episode 93, so I think I've warmed up pretty.
That's right. You're ready to go on the court.
Yeah, yeah. And then of course I step out there, and you know, all of a sudden there's holes in my shoes, and I can't, you know, I can't get my pants up. But we're here. So can you talk a little bit about yourself and your own background? How did you become a writer? Like, what made you want to talk about these topics?
Sure. Well, I began as a dad blogger.
Okay.
When my son was born 15 years ago, I was your average guy, and I've worked every kind of job in my life. I went to a high school for the arts, and I cared about graphic design and art and whatever, but I couldn't, you know, when I graduated high school, I grew up in the kind of family where nobody was really talking to anybody else, and there was a lot of divorce trauma, and people were freaked out. And so I literally graduated from high school, and they said, well, great, glad to have you, goodbye now. And they showed me the front door, and I got in a friend's car and went from Houston, Texas, where I grew up, to Austin, Texas. I had no vehicle of my own. I had no plans for college. I had no sense of even what that would mean. So I walked around the neighborhood until I found a restaurant that needed a dishwasher, and I took the dishwashing job and proceeded to stay drunk for probably a year and wash dishes. And that was like my holding pattern until I could try and figure out how it all worked, because my parents were no good at teaching any of that. And eventually, like 3 years later, I took the SAT, realizing you sort of need one of those. And then I went to a junior college in Dickinson, Texas, College of the Mainland, and I just signed up and started going to classes. And in the interim, I picked up the skill of running printing presses. Tells you how old I am.
One of my first jobs, I worked at a company where they just ran printing presses. I worked in the shipping department. So
I ran multi-lift printing presses, and it was a copy shop. You know, you'd come in and you'd pay a certain amount of money, and you know, if you wanted to spend a little more money, you could use the copy machine. But the cheap way to do it was to, you know, have 500 copies printed on a printing press. So that's what I did. I did that, and I put myself through the first year of school, and I ended up getting on the dean's list and achieving some sense of self as a student. And eventually, years later, I ended up in a job where they put a Macintosh computer on my desk, and so I started learning software on that, design software. I wanted to set type in a circle. That was my big interest, you know. So I found the software, got the company to buy it, started playing with Adobe Illustrator and some other apps, and grew that. I ended up doing design for companies. I ended up buying a house. I got married. I did all the things that we sort of do as we try to grow our lives. But I worked construction. I built cornice work on apartment buildings, and, you know, drank beer from 5 o'clock on. I did all that hard fucking labor stuff until I realized, you know, I kind of like art. Let me go study that. Let me see if I can get a job doing something like that. But I've been there, man, you know, in terms of the just like $5 an hour, and, you know, that job could end tomorrow. And it's, you know, I wanted to do something creative. I wanted to do something more creative than the sort of running a printing press or doing, you know, cornice work is not creative carpentry at all.
Yeah.
It's just brutal. Like I remember the first time they put me 3 floors up on scaffolding that was a 2x4, right? That was it.
Oh yeah.
And handed you the frickin' air gun, you know, to go nail this stuff up, and climb up and go do it, or go home, whichever you prefer.
Well, construction is such a wide spectrum in terms of, you know, like safety or like the quality of work, creativeness. You know, I'm lucky enough. I got into a union, so I work mostly around like Jersey City area, and we do
Yeah.
all high rise construction. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, as an electrician, I could design, I could put all these cool lights and wire things in all these cool ways. Then you
Yeah.
realize there's a thing called the code, and there's actually rules. So it's like, oh, I can't do any of that stuff. That creativity actually got me in trouble, and I wasted an entire day's work.
Oh my God.
But
Yeah.
no, it could go any way. Like there's the real kind of
The
lower rung
construction work
jobs.
I did, people broke their arms and just got tucked into their car and go home.
Yeah.
And I remember one day being, 3 floors up, 100-degree heat. And one of the guys our crew boss had hired was a drunk. And it was his first day, and he had managed to get up there, but he sat down on the scaffolding and he couldn't bring himself to move. He was too terrified. He was petrified, frozen in place. Right. And he was between me and the way down. Right. And I'm holding the nail gun, and I've got, my belt and all this crap on. And literally this was the walkway, right? And he was sitting on it. And I thought, okay, I've either got to talk this guy into getting down, or I got to climb over him. Right. And 4 weeks later, you're walking up and down the catwalk. It doesn't matter. Right.
Yeah.
But
you get used to it fast.
You do. But it's not a simple thing. And I remember to this day that guy, and I thought, I don't want to be him. I don't want to be a guy who drinks his way through life. And I started out that way. I could have ended up there permanently. I don't want to be a guy who drinks his way through life. And I don't want to be a guy who's unable to get past his own fear, and that's our work life teaches us that, but our life at home teaches us that. Eventually we come to that same set of questions. And for me, when my son was born, I had done all this stuff. I'd gotten a mortgage and gotten married and gotten divorced and done things, right?
Checked all the boxes, right?
But it didn't I never felt like I was in the clear. I never felt like I was, that I wasn't constantly having to prove myself again and again and again and again. And no matter how hard I tried, I never got that sense of being validated as a man or as a husband or any of that stuff. But then my son was born, and it's not some moment where your son is born and the angels start singing.
That's the way people would lead you to believe that it is. Everything changed at that moment.
Not remotely.
Yeah.
In fact, what happened to me in that moment was when my son was born, I said, "Oh, a baby. Cool. Here, you hold this baby. I'm going to go paint the outside of the house. I'm going to go fix the screen. Let me just keep doing my stuff that I did and do. I'll do the laundry. just don't hand me the baby, because I don't know what that even means." And I literally, there were times when my wife would say, "Okay, I need to go to the store and I need to go do a couple of errands. So here, you hold the baby." And she would hand me this baby at the beginning and go to the store or whatever she was going to do. And the clocks in the house just stopped. And I felt like, oh, this is forever. And I don't know what to do. And I wish she would come back and take care of this baby so I could go back to doing the things I do that define me as, whatever. But within a year or so, all of that changed, because babies don't ever stop needing what they need, and they don't disappear just because you're uncomfortable.
Sure.
And over time, I began to understand what it meant to hold him and to care for him and to have him acknowledge me. And I began to discover parts of myself that I didn't know existed, which was my ability to be a loving father, to connect with another human being, to be there and to be in service to someone else, not in service to some transactional thing where I do this and you give me that, or, paycheck or sex or whatever it is, but instead just to be in service of this little creature, this little entity that came into my life. And slowly he became a young boy and I became a father. And when that happened, I began to say, well, so I want to write about, because it was weird. I was I was a home contractor doing design for clients and stuff for years before he came along. So I was always there with him in the house. He was always part of my life. And you probably picked up on this. My second divorce, which was from his mother, he was then full-time with me, and I was both earning the money and looking after him and doing all those things. And in that process, I began to say to myself, why do people look at me strange when I'm at the park with my son at, noon? What, are you babysitting him? Would you get fired from your job? Well, why are you here?
Yeah. Where'd you get
Be
that baby from, bro?
Be six mothers and their kids and my kid. And I'm thinking, please go play with them. I'm not going to be talking to the moms because they think I might be a homeless guy, whatever it is. Right. And so I began to ask questions. Well, what's going on with that? Right. And then the next set of questions was, and if the culture is giving me these messages about what my role is supposed to be, then what message are they going to start giving my son?
Mm-hmm.
And that led me to begin thinking about our larger culture of masculinity and what the messages are that I was taught, why it was that I had to have a child and like be freaking reprogrammed over the course of a year in order just to feel like I knew how to connect with a human being, right? How did that happen? And what did that say about my romantic relationships prior to that and even during that? All of these things led me to start saying, I want to understand what happened to me. What caused me to leave my parents' home not knowing anything about the world or relationships or connection or growing, or what led me to think that my solutions were in 2 12-packs a night, of beer. What
So
happened?
Is it fair to say that that fatherhood is really what kind of opened your eyes and caused you to be
It made me
curious?
understand that it made me understand what was missing in my life.
Okay.
And what was missing for me was human connection, authentic, real, meaningful human connection, and a sense of purpose that was bigger than me, than just building my wealth or my home or my family or my whatever, but a larger sense of purpose about what it means to be human. And for me, that's authentic, real connection. And I started small with just my baby. I was still cut off from most all other relationships in life. And it took time for me to do the work to get past a lot of other hurdles to grow connection. But that's been my job, is to learn to be a connected human being.
So what was the next step along the way? Like you're curious about, how did all this stuff happen? How did I come to believe, and how did I learn all this stuff? How was I programmed? What was the next step? Is that when you started? Did you research?
Right. Well, I began writing. I started writing about fatherhood, and then I started writing about masculinity, just the questions of what it means to be a man. And I began running into the work of other men who were asking these same questions. People like, it's a guy named Tony Porter, who has an organization called A Call to Men, and he did a TED Talk about the man box, I think in 2006. I don't know. Don't hold me to that. But if you go Google it, TED Talk, Tony Porter, A Call to Men. That's the name of the TED Talk, is A Call to Men. Mm-hmm. He talked about the man box, and he talked about all the things that were taught to him about what it means to be a man and how damaging those were to his connection in the world, but also to the way that he treated women. And it's a powerful talk. I mean, it's and it's had millions of views, right? Mm-hmm. It's this moment. It was that TED Talk that made me think, okay, so there are rules. What are the rules? And it takes you, anybody listening to this podcast, if I say to anybody when I do presentations, when I say, what are the rules for being a man? And men and women both can pretty much give them to you. They can write them. They just start, I say, write them in the chat, and they write them in the chat.
It's striking how similar they all are from different sources. Everybody,
how universal they are.
Yeah.
Right. And they shift and change a little bit based on the intersectionality of culture, and race and some other things. But the idea that men don't show their emotions is pretty universal. Don't cry. Don't do that. And men say, well, I don't want to cry. And I say, look, emotions are not, don't cry. Emotions are everything. Joy, connection, meaning, all of that stuff. Right. And we give ourselves permission to do that with our young children. But we go out in the world and we're like, don't show that, because that's a sign of weakness, and you'll get your ass handed to you. Mm-hmm. So don't show your emotions. Always be a leader. Always be in control. Be heterosexual, not homosexual. Have control over women and girls. Be a breadwinner, not a caregiver. Mm-hmm. And be a breadwinner is a huge one, right?
Yeah,
Bring home that money and supply that money to your household. And then if you want, that's your job. That's what you did. And you can lay down on the couch and watch the game while somebody else takes care of the household. And, you know, if your kids are getting upset, send them to their mother and just be a guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are all the sort of man box ideas that my father's generation had.
My father's as well.
Yeah. And it's shifting a little bit now, but that emotional disconnection piece where I didn't really know my father as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I did. And later we connected in much more real ways. But as a kid, my father was gone by the time I was 7. My stepfather, he was an engineer, man. He was a pencil protector in his pocket. There wasn't anything. And my mother was pretty much the same way. And so we grow up with a model of masculinity that's about doing, right? We make money, we get lots of sex, we have, we're able to dominate the guys around us in our circle. We get on this hierarchical domination-based masculinity thing instead of connection,
mm-hmm.
which is what we're born doing, right? Young boys, they just connect and they love each other. They have so much joy. And the second thing, Tony Porter, man box culture came in and I was like, uh-huh. And then I ran into the work of a woman named Niobe Way, who wrote a book called Deep Secrets. And her book,
talked about her a lot in your work.
Oh, she changed everything for me because she's done research about this question of disconnection. Why are boys so warm and affectionate, and why are men so standoffish? What's going on there? How does that happen? And her research, she spent decades asking a single simple question of boys in early adolescence. And that question is, what does your best friend mean to you? And these boys in early adolescence, 11, 12 years old, say, I love my best friend. They use the word love without any shame.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing they say universally is, without my best friend, I would go crazy. I would go nuts. I have these intimate, meaningful conversations about my deepest secrets with my best friend, and that keeps me sane. Then 4 or 5 years later, she interviews the same boys and they say, yeah, my best friend, Mike, he still lives around the corner, but I don't see him that much anymore. Or another kid said, yeah, that friendship's sort of on a crossfade. It's sort of fading out.
Mm-hmm.
And if they say anything nice about their friend, oh yeah, Mike's a good basketball player. No homo, they say.
Mm-hmm.
No homo. And what she discovered through the research was these boys are now busy proving what they are not. And what they're terrified of being accused of being, what they're proving they are not, is little kids, girly, or gay. So for them, growing up, becoming a man, is disengaging from these meaningful, intimate friendships and stepping away from all of that expression of emotion. And when boys reach late adolescence, is when they disengage from these friendships, is the moment at which their suicide rates become 4 times that of girls.
Well,
and go ahead.
If I could, on the topic of that disconnect, when it comes to friendships and close relationships,
yeah,
like, that's something that continues all throughout men's lives, especially, as a husband, as a married man now, I see it a lot in my peers, other guys that are married. We grew up with these very tight knit groups of friends, people that we loved, and they were like brothers to us. And now we all have families, and it's kind of like, all right, well, I'll see you when I see you. It takes 2 months to plan, a meetup for coffee or something. And we just accept it. It is what it is. And it's not that there's necessarily bad blood. It's just, we're caught up in our own lives with our own families. We kind of defer to our wives to set up social events. And
there are no social mechanisms or systems which encourage that. In fact, we tell boys who are, 17 years old, we say, okay, all that meaning, all that stuff that without which you would go crazy, which is 1 or 2 close friends, but it's this network, this community of friendships.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to turn all that off. And everything that you were getting from that kept you sane, now you get it from one girl, and she's over there. So, and God help you if you're gay, you're still, there's your answer. Good luck with that.
That's a lot of pressure to put on one person.
It's a lot of pressure to put on a girl. They're not ready to handle that amount of demand. And we're not we're not wired for that. We're social animals, right? But instead we dial down to, and this is why you often hear the story. Yeah, my wife does all the social stuff. I don't,
Yeah.
So men end up having what are called friendships of proximity, right? Our male friendships are, oh, I'm friends with the guys at the gym, or I'm friends with the guys at work.
I know
But
the husbands of my wife's friends.
Yeah, or the
Yeah.
other dads in the PTA at my kid's school.
For
And
sure.
so we stand around in these groups of men and we go, yeah, did you see the game? Yeah, I saw the game. It's a good game.
Oh, which way do you take to get to work? Huh?
Yeah, how's it going?
I take 78. It sucks sometimes, but
Yeah, exactly. And if our kid changes schools or we change the gym, we just drop all those friendships and pick up the next one because they're all the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're all the same.
There's no real connection there.
Yeah, they're all surface level. So what we need to understand as men is that a robust, real, authentic circle of male friendships is exactly what resources us to have better marriages and have better job lives because it is in those spaces where we're able to process our challenges, where we're able to get resource during times of difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, we've been talked into this man box thing where we get a lot of sex, we make a lot of money, we have the best car, we keep doing domination-based masculinity, which is to prove where we are on that hierarchy, to outdo the guys around us. But it's all about doing. It's not about who we are. It doesn't matter who we are. Did you make the money? Did you have the sex? Did you get the better job? Did you get the bigger house? Did you do this and this and this? And what ultimately happens when you're in a culture of doing, whereby you're ranked, your value as a person is ranked based on this doing, is you run out of time. Because sooner or later, you're going to age out of being able to pick up women in bars, being able to drink everybody under the table, being able to get that next big raise or big advancement. And that's if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of guys don't make it on some of those markers. So they end up being down on the hierarchy. And we know as men in hierarchy culture, domination culture, that we're expected to take shit from the guys above us and dish it out to those below. Mm-hmm. And if we fail to if we fail to dominate the guys below us, we lose status, and that adds to the number of guys above us.
Well, so this system, there's a lot of losers in this system. And I think one of the things that we brushed on for a second that I feel like doesn't get enough attention is the guys who are considered the losers in this system, the guys who maybe have a hard time finding a woman, maybe don't have the best job, who, can't afford a nice place to live. Like those guys, and those are the guys, like you said, that are on the bottom of that hierarchy and are just catching shit from everybody above.
Yep.
And I feel like in society, we've seen this kind of explode in a way. You've seen like incel culture. You see a lot of like when it comes to gamers, like I do a lot of nerd stuff here, and there's a lot of very toxic behavior when it comes in like the gaming community. And it's a lot of it, unfortunately, is guys who just kind of aren't social butterflies, don't maybe have the best job, aren't the best looking, can't get a girl. They kind of turn inwards, and it gets ugly after a while.
Right. And they're isolated. We have to remember that the system doesn't let them have a group of friends, because ultimately if we do select friends in a system like I'm talking about, we're very mindful of their status, right? I'll be friends with this guy because he's a little higher at the company, and that's good for me. I don't want to be friends with those guys because if the guys higher at the company see me friends with those guys in the mailroom, then they're going to think I'm a loser, right? So we don't make friendships based on who's authentically a good fit for us. Oh yeah, I like that guy. Hey, you want to be friends? We don't do that.
Yeah.
So these guys at the bottom of the hierarchy, not only do they not I got a mortgage, I renovated my house, I got a nice car. These things validate us somewhat. So the guys that are doing okay, they get that sort of cold, material validation over and over again.
But it's hollow.
Which is, I mean, look, it's valid, but it is not valid in the absence of authentic human relationships and connection in the world, right?
Okay.
So, but I did that game till I was 45 years old and my son was born. And I realized, wait a minute, there's a whole nother side to being human. And let's do that. Let's get a nice house and fix it up. Let's have a marriage. Oh, please, let's be a breadwinner if that's a fit for us. But let's not say you got to be, heterosexual, not homosexual. And certainly let's not say we have to have control over women and girls. And that whole system is basically about that. So ultimately, you end up being 58 years old. You got wherever you got to on the hierarchy, and you can't pick up women in the bars. And suddenly you can't, if you're a blue collar guy doing plumbing or whatever, there's a limit to what you can do. And you start to falter in that breadwinner thing. And that's why economic collapses nationally are so incendiary, because so many men are hanging on to that breadwinner marker as the last real validating part of life, because they don't have those relationships. And when that falls apart, this is why we have massive level of suicide among men, especially among white men, because our economy can't be relied on to keep men employed, and they don't have that circle of friends. So I did men's work. I wrote about masculinity for 8-10 years, right? Look at me. I'm the masculinity guy. I can talk about the man box. I can talk about the systems. Wow, cool. But I hadn't done my own work. I was still in this place. And I grew up with a brother who was brutal. He was brutally abusive. And my parents didn't do anything to stop it. And I grew up in a culture where beating each other up was, and I hit puberty at 17. So I was little with a high-pitched voice, and I had "punch me" written all fucking over me, right? I have a whole story of how I navigated junior high school just tricks to avoid being the one who got picked to be beaten up, right?
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I did an entire episode how the biggest bully in my life growing up was my little sister. So don't feel too bad.
Yeah. Well, my brother was older and he was bigger and he hit puberty early, and so I end up going 50 years later, 55 years later, I go to the Mankind Project and I do a weekend. And I have a friend, Boyson, who's with them, and I was writing about masculinity, and every year, 6 months, he'd say, "Hey, you should come do the weekend." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? No fucking way I'm going to do a cult drumming in the woods bullshit. I'm not doing that, man."
I've seen these online. I've heard about them, but I'm very interested to hear exactly what goes on at a retreat like this.
Well, let me just say, I was very much like, but not just like this Groucho Marx sort of, I wouldn't be a member of any club it would have me as a member, but literally, like, I was like, and because I didn't want to be around a bunch of men. I didn't trust them. I didn't like them. I was tired of the bullshit, I just know. But also something else, something way down in my gut would shake and rattle and say, brother, you stay with me. I'm your best pal here. I'm the messed up 10-year-old kid who ended up being the kid who drank a gallon of wine every night from 18 till he was 20. I'm your buddy. Don't go up against all that. It's too late for you anyway. You're old now. Forget it. And that fear kept making itself known. And so I say, no, not doing that. No, not doing it. And then one day I thought, okay, I'm out here talking to people about the damage and the harm and the isolation that masculinity represents. And I got this big empty space in me that, I'm sorry, but my son was not put on this earth to fill for me, right? I mean, he may have shown me the path to that, but it's not his damn job to be the meaning for me fully. So I went and did my work. And there's a moment in most men's work, I don't care if it's Every Man or Mankind Project or Human or whatever, there's a moment when you have your moment, we call it being on the carpet, when you speak your truth, right? You say what your deal is. And I stood there, you're watching all this stuff go on over the weekend. It's a program, it's a process. And I really was concerned it was a cult or something. Like I don't want to do that. It's a fucking cult. It's not a cult. It's just a process. It's just a process that a bunch of guys created based on Iron John and a bunch of other things. And it is not, I promise you, a cult. And I am very wary of any kind of stuff like that. They don't tell you what to do afterwards. They say, find your purpose now. Go find it, whatever that is.
But there's no Kool-Aid to drink. There's no Sea Org. There's none of that stuff.
But there's some running around the fire, and there's some drumming and there's some stuff, right, that you
Hey,
got to do.
plenty of guys do that already drunk. So,
Right.
that's
It's
fine.
kind of like your backyard on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So the point here is that I stood there and I said to a group of men that I had not met but a day before, I said, based on what happened to me in my life, I don't like men. I don't trust men. I hate men. And I'm sick to death of being alone. I'm just sick of it. And that moment, that thing in my gut, which I used to call the basement, and every few years, I've been to therapy. I've done stuff. I know what it means to confront your issues. But every few years I would try to go down the stairs to the basement, right, and see what the hell that was down there. And it would start rattling its chains and it would start howling. And I'd say, okay, not this week. I'll try again next. I never confronted it until that moment because I needed to say that to men and I need to hear what they would say back. And they said, well, you want to trust us? You want to try? And I was like, well, shit.
Why not?
Okay. Yeah, why not? Why not acknowledge that I both don't trust men and I need friendships. I need them. And I've been living for years trying to validate myself without them. And you can't do it. The human animal cannot do that. And men cannot do that. So that began a series of changes for me, which are ongoing. But I made friendships with men both inside that organization, but it also changed my friendships outside. I had a couple of hurdles I had to get over.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was just a whole slew of shit about victimhood that I carried, which you see in incels. You see it in those communities of men who are feeling like they are victims, even as they victimize others, even as they dish out abuse.
Absolutely.
Look what you made me do to women and whatever. And we have to understand we're programmed to think women are less. Man box culture literally operate this thing that Niobe Way found that boys were doing, which is, don't be a little kid, girly or gay. What that is that whenever a boy expresses too much joy or too much emotion or too much connection or need for connection, we say, what are you, a girl? What are you, a sissy?
We link it to
we say a lot of worse
femininity.
things, right?
Yeah.
So we are denigrating the feminine in that moment. We're wrongly gendering natural human capacities for connection. We're wrongly gendering them as feminine, and then we're denigrating the feminine. And for boys, for young boys, this doesn't happen once a week or once a day. This happens hourly.
Yeah.
If we're not calling each other sissies and fags every 30 seconds, right? This hierarchy, bullying, microaggression language. The end result is we grow up with literally programmed that women or the feminine is somehow less. And no matter what you are, I don't care if you're laying in the gutter, you're better than a woman. You're better than a girl.
Well, the real insidious thing about it is that it's not just boys who absorb this; it's girls as well, and they grow up, and women, whether they realize it or not, sometimes they're contributing to this cycle. They're associating the same things with femininity and they're associating it with being less than. And it's like you're denigrating yourself essentially. Like you only want the man that exhibits these, what we would consider as toxic behavior.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're perpetuating this cycle.
Or just do women can say to a man, no, I don't want you to be anti-women, but I do want you to be the breadwinner. And I want you to be like, show your emotions, but not too many.
Yeah. I'm not attracted to a man who cries at a movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things like that.
And so what they're basically, many men who wake up and say, I'm not going down that freaking chute to complete collapse when I'm 64 and staring down the barrel of a shotgun in an empty house. So I'm going to start making some changes. And they start to try to make those changes. And the first people that challenge them on it may be the people in their own intimate partners. And that could be gay or straight. Their intimate partners can say, no, you've been doing this for so long that I don't know what that other person looks like. And I'm not sure I'm ready to deal with that level of change. But also, there's economic fear in that, because if my husband suddenly starts acting differently at the job site, he may not get that raise. He may not get that next job. He may not, and our family is then at risk.
So this is a topic that I wanted to touch on is like, especially in the workplace. I know this is something that really resonated with me in your book. This was the Don't Mess with Joe chapter.
Sure.
We talked about, the way guys talk, the locker room talk, the way they denigrate women, and we're so used to it. We're like, he's just talking, they're saying he wants to bang that broad that works in the office, like to us, we're used to it. We hear it all the time. It's like, it's nothing. But God forbid that we feel inclined to challenge that or push back on that behavior.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden we put ourselves, in the spotlight. We become a target now. If you push back, oh, what's your problem? What are you, some kind of you feminist now? You feminazi now? You want to speak up for all the women now? Like what?
Yeah.
You never did anything in your life. You're Mr. Perfect. And that fear of being called out like that when we do push back, that keeps a lot of guys quiet. And it's that intimidation. These guys, they talk about the stuff. You spoke about this in the book, but they kind of test the line. They see how far they can push you, see what they can get away with. And if
when you talk about domination culture, the dominant individual is always going to be the one that controls the conversation, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like every man agrees with this idea that women are less. It's just a bunch of us in the middle are like, look, man, I got 3 projects to get out by the end of the week. I got to do this. I got to do that. I'm looking after my daughter and my wife. I'm going to make sure my daughter gets a good college degree. I'm taking care of her, but I'm not going to challenge this asshole because I know that he'll make my work life miserable or even possibly do economic harm to me in the workplace. And that'll cost my daughter. And I'm not going to put her well-being at risk. But what we don't understand is that millions and millions of men are silent. And once you're silent, once you get used to being silent around that stuff, then it costs us a little piece of our integrity, right? Our little piece of our soul.
And we feel it each time. It's like
and every man in the room, because everyone's silent, every man in the room thinks I'm the only one who thinks this guy's full of shit, for talking that way about women. So instead of reaching critical mass and saying, no, how about you shut up, Frank? And fucking straighten up your act. This is ridiculous. She's not a piece of meat in the office for you to talk about that way. Don't do it. Instead of us all collectively understanding that we're probably a majority, we all just remain silent. And the problem with that theory is, I'm looking after the women that are close to me, is that sooner or later, they're going to have to go out into the world and we're not going to be there. And if guys like Frank are out there still predating and still creating this culture where women are treated as less, then they're going to run into that guy. And we should have challenged him earlier. We should have gone up against him when we had the chance, because later we're not going to be there. And this whole idea of how we've constructed masculinity as dominating and abusive and all those things, win at all costs and control everything, because that's the key to being safe and being successful. It's not. Yeah. It's the key to blowing your brains out when you're 68. It's what it is, because it's devoid of connection.
The interesting thing to me is the blatant hypocrisy on a lot of the guys, because the guys that talk like this, they're the same guys who maybe have daughters and they say, oh yeah, when my daughter starts wanting to date, the first boyfriend's going to have to come have a talk with me in the garage while I polish my shotgun, or something corny as hell like that. Yep. And at the same time, then as soon as you say, well, there's problems with the way we think about masculinity, it's like, oh, why are you attacking masculinity? It's like, well, you're just saying that you don't trust men around your daughter, and then all of a sudden you're defensive when somebody says that maybe men need to rethink some things.
Right. Well, why? One thing is, why don't we just let him have a talk with your daughter in the garage while she polishes the shotgun? Why not empower your daughter to stand up for herself instead of treating her like she somehow has no agency and you got to run interference for her?
Exactly.
But also, what's really interesting is that in my work, and you'll see it in the book. I mean, the book, the little METOO book for men is 75 pages long. You can read it on an airplane flight, right? But what I try to do is I try to lay out the ways in which men, us, are not actually empowered by this culture. We're disempowered by it. We're stripped of our emotional connection. And what's important to understand is that when we talk about hiding your emotions for our sons, and we say, don't show your emotions on the playground, man, you're going to get in trouble with them. Ultimately, what we're doing, because emotions emerge in the back and forth of relating, right? They emerge in conversation with other people. I can start out a conversation with you, and I feel a little uncertain, and then we talk a little more, and that changes to a sense of appreciation of you, and then I feel kind of warm and connected. Or it can go the other way, and I can start to get more irritated, more angry. Emotions emerge they don't just exist in us. They emerge between people in the moment by moment of relating. So when we tell our sons, don't show your emotions, what we're basically doing is cutting them off from forming relationships. We're cutting them off from doing the trial and error work over the period of years that they need to learn to do nuanced expression and connection, to appreciate difference, to do all the things they need to do to be successful, to be able to form relationships with anybody they meet. And this lack of connection is killing us. And if you've seen the loneliness numbers, the statistics, right? Cigna did a study last year. 1 in 2 Americans, all ages, all genders, feel sometimes or always alone. That's over 100 million human beings who feel disconnected. And the health impact of that is equal to smoking a pack of cigarettes. So you get higher levels of heart disease, dramatically higher levels of heart disease, neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, diabetes, obesity, depression, all that shit, because we don't know how to connect. And I think men lead that. They cause that phenomenon to ripple through culture.
Well, it's like you said, like the suicide rate for men is what, 3.5 to 4 times as high as women. Like that's there's no mistaking the correlation there.
Right. And it's because men have been cheated out of connection by a culture. So when I talk to men, I'm not talking about your masculinity. I'm talking about the culture that taught you what you believe about being a man. And the minute you want to start asking questions like, hey, why do I believe that? That's not about your masculinity. That's about the choices you've made that were forced on you by a system that said, if you don't agree with this, we'll kick your ass.
Well, I really like the way you frame that, is that men, it's not that you were the problem, it's you were cheated. You weren't given the tools necessary to operate in the world as a full, complete human being. Like they sent you out there with one hand tied behind your back, essentially.
Yes, they did. And they sent you out there with a lot of ideas about what matters that don't matter. And they stripped you of the ideas that really do. And what's interesting is that, you know, we as men, whenever we're ready to do what we call men's work, which is just to go and sit in a circle of men and say, this is what's happening for me. That one step of saying, I'm going to take off the mask. I'm going to say what's really going on for me, including all the anger and resentment and loss and frustration and shame and all the shit that pretending to be something you're not for 20 or 30 or 40 years creates for us. We cover up so much of what's authentic about us because that doesn't fit in the man box, right? And a very blatant version of that would be gay men who pretend they're straight. That's a huge cover. But we all have individual parts of ourselves. Hey, when I remember as a kid, I was a complete comic book hound. I love comic books, but I knew that to like comic books was like, so I hid that. I didn't talk about that. So something that brought me great joy, I hid. I have
a story exactly about that. When I was in high school, Pokemon was that just kind of come out. It was kind of taking the world by storm. And I was a little bit older than I think the target demographic. But, I loved it. I still love it today. And now my son loves it. So we bond on that. But at the time, I remember I had gotten a little keychain, a couple keychains. I'm like, it's funny. It's cool. And I put it on my backpack. And
oh boy,
what a mistake that was.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, what a mistake. They ripped the piss out of me. And I learned a lesson there. All right, well, don't show anybody you like this stuff because you're going to pay the consequence. You're going to pay the price.
Right. And I think culture has changed some.
For sure.
I think there's a lot more variability in terms of frankly, young men and women aren't buying as much of this bullshit as we were forced to buy. They don't buy it around gender. They don't buy it as much around race. Things are evolving. But the rules for the man box are still out there. And you can still get killed for not doing it right. I mean, make note, this is not just about microaggressions and bullying. Matthew Shepard got hung on a fence to die in the middle of a snowstorm because he was gay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other end of man box culture. That's the other end of, because so many men who are in man box culture, it's not just designed to make a set of rules and create a hierarchy. Its actual purpose is for us to police each other, for us to enforce these rules. And when someone steps way outside the box, if we've been having a bad day or we lost our job or we're fear of losing some status, one of the best ways to signal that we're in the box and we're on the team is to beat the living crap out of somebody who doesn't fit. All those guys at the bottom of the ladder that you talked about, every domination hierarchy requires a target population. So they're down there as a way to say, well, you're failed men, so you're the target. And this is why the original Columbine shooters shot up a school, because they were bullied mercilessly by a system that says you're not the winners, so we get to abuse you. And that's going on all over the place. And you talked about incels. Incels are a classic example of they are so invested in their victimhood as externally put upon them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a victim because women won't pick me. I'm a victim because I'm not a Chad. I'm a victim because whatever. Now I have the right to do violence because that's what people do when they're victims. And they never self-reflect on what the culture did to them, larger culture of disconnection. They think Chads are important because the culture sold them that idea. Chads have more value than me. We know from nerd culture that any kind of person can be loved, can be appreciated, can make interesting things. We know this. Of
course.
But the man box culture is still out there teaching these guys that Chads and desirable women and all this whole false hierarchy has stripped them, and they do no self-reflection about their own agency in that. You can choose to step out of that man box idea of what's valued and find community. So we're trying to reach out to these guys. We're trying to reach out to men who have a lovely home in the suburbs and a nice car and a wife they love and great kids, but still feel that like, what happened to all that joy I had as a young boy with my friends? Where did that all go? Why did that disappear?
And I think that's very common. Guys, I'm going to be 36 next month, but a lot of guys, it's like you have trouble finding the joy in life, and just the simple things that we enjoyed growing up. It doesn't feel the same. Like what changed?
Because you don't have close friends to share it with. That's why. And I'm telling you, man, my life has, look, I'm old, man. I'm 60 years old. Okay.
You look good for 60.
I do well, you know what though? I'll tell you something. Some of the joy of having connection in my life may be making me younger.
I would not have said 60 if you had asked.
Right. Well, if you track my story, from some of the things that I mark in my history that
there were signs along the way.
It ages me a little bit. But my point here is that I have such joy in my life now because there are men out there in my community of friendships, which we just fucking love to hear from each other. We love to talk. We love to connect. We love to do stuff. And this has come back into my life. You know what? I mean, having a copy of Jack Kirby's Demon #1, checking it out is all fine and good. But if you don't have somebody who loves it equally that you can share it with, 100%. It's just not the joyful experience. It's not.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, keep going.
You're right on the money on something right now. This community that now exists, thanks to the internet, we're able to find like-minded men and create this community of guys trying to be more complete and trying to find who they are and help one another, which I think is the most important thing. We're all here trying to better ourselves and one another. Have you seen like movement in this, this community? Have you seen it been growing over the years? Like, what's the progress or progression been like in your view?
I have a very clear answer to that, but I'll tell you something else first before I skip off that. I want to say that one more thing about the incels and about men who are reactive about feminism and all that stuff, that there's this massive cognitive disconnect that's going on. because those men, I mean, I believe we're all a bit reactive to being corrected by women, by people who may have different politics, whatever. But the reason we're reactive is we've been policed all our lives by the men around us, by the larger community of men. And we don't admit to that. We say women, feminists are trying to run my life. All the guys I grew up with ran my life. They defined what I could be, what I could not be, what I could say. And I don't mean my close friends. Some of those guys were a little bit more. I'm talking about the 100 guys at my high school who literally, and the alphas who would just spot you in a crowd and come mess with you if you weren't fitting in right. So men have been policed all our lives about how to do manhood right. This narrow set of rules for how to be a real man. Forget the full range of being human. Mm-hmm. And we are fucking traumatized out of emotional expression and connection. We're traumatized into doing violence to other men as a way to validate ourselves. It's all longstanding trauma. And when we finally get to the place where we're doing it right, and then some woman shows up and says, hey, great culture you got there, but you're fucking with women 24/7. We go, hey, I did my job. I learned to do all this stuff. Don't tell me now that I got to undo it all because I have 30 years of trauma that got me here, right? Yeah. I finally got wedged into this little performance. So men are reactive, but we don't own the fact that it's not, women haven't been kicking our ass for 30, 40 years. Men have, right? This culture of masculinity. And, but in answer to your question, what has shifted? What I have seen in 10 years of this work, and I'll tell you, 10, 12 years ago, when we said we need to have a conversation about masculinity, a lot of people said, you kidding me, man? Men have been the conversation for 600 years. Men own the conversation. They've been it. But bullshit. We need to talk about, underrepresented populations. We need to talk about people, LGBTQ people. We need to talk about the other folks. Now, and there wasn't a lot of compassion for men. It was like, oh, poor fucking middle-class white guy. Yeah, you've had a tough life, Now I think women, and I meet a lot of feminists who are talking about the intersectional issues and this idea of compassion for what it has cost men to live in this culture of masculinity, the disconnection it's created, the isolation. And sadly, a lot of that ends up being rage and anger. I talked earlier about how if you need to vent out sideways, if something's going wrong in your shit and you're afraid of losing status, you can pulverize somebody and gain it back. Mm-hmm. Men lose their jobs and 3 days later they're beating up their wives, right? To try to get that domination thing back. So women are absorbing, LGBTQ people of color, they're absorbing a lot of violence from these poor men. But nonetheless, everyone is saying, okay, we need some compassion because the trauma that is inflicted on men started when they were infants. Little boys, little 3-4-year-old boys being told to man up and shut the fuck up and be a man and all that. So the conversation has become more compassionate, and men are being invited to both check themselves on bad behavior, but also let's hear your stories, man. Let's hear what you went through because this is real. This disconnection is real, and it harms us politically and socially. Communities are hurt by it. When men are in disconnection, all of their issues come out sideways. They come out as violence. They come out as aggression. They come out as, we have a cult of individuality in America. Individual is the only thing that matters. Community doesn't matter, right? They used to, the idea that, if you don't do it yourself, it didn't really happen. Right. Yes. We don't create things in partnership with groups and communities. We have to stand alone on our horse out in the middle of the fucking desert somewhere and be men. That's isolation. So I think the conversation is changing both in terms of men saying, this is a straitjacket, I don't want it anymore. Yeah. Because we should be actually, I talk about the culture of masculinity and men's individual identities, right? Okay. And for men, this man box culture stuff that hit us when we were infants, We were taught it by our mothers, our fathers, our sisters, our brothers, the kids in the neighborhood, the kids at school, the teachers, the coaches, the ministers, television. It's so ubiquitous. It's the water we swim in. It's the air we breathe. We don't see it. We just think, oh, that's just me. I'm just a man. So if we can invite men, and that's what I try to do in my book. I try to break it down very quickly and very simply. This is the culture of masculinity. This is identity. And if we can drive a little wedge of daylight between those two, just a little bit of daylight in there, then men can start asking questions. Why do I believe what I believe about women? Or why do I believe what I believe? Why do I feel like I need to do more every damn day, that I'll never finish proving that I'm a man? Why does it feel like that? And in that regard, men are starting to say, I want masculinity to not be this. I want it to be as wide a range of possible expression as there can be out there. And then every man can pick his own place. If you want to be traditional, good for you, man. Be a breadwinner, be stoic, be whatever that is. But don't beat the crap out of other people who don't want to do it that way. Like, let that be one version of masculinity among thousands, and we can all find our place on that continuum, right?
Definitely.
That's freedom. That would be freedom.
You remind me of a viral, I guess, a little video that was going around social media a few months back. And it was a couple of guys, I don't know what city they were in, but they were just kind of hanging out on the sidewalk. And one guy was about to bite into a hot dog. And then the guy filming literally stopped on the guy as he was about to put the hot dog into his mouth. He's like, yo! And it was funny because the guy just went and threw the hot dog. And it was like, it's funny, but do people really?
Oh, real. Yeah.
We're laughing. This guy was so afraid of being viewed as gay. He couldn't even eat a hot dog in front of people.
That's right.
Like, it's hilarious, but also we all understand, whether, consciously or subconsciously, like, that's real. There's people that are.
What you witnessed was he was having his masculinity policed.
Yes.
And it was funny. A lot of the policing that goes on isn't, somebody getting punched in the face. It's little jokes between men.
It's
right.
It's cloaked in humor.
Yeah, little funny jokes that we all just keep each other in line, right? Just a little bit of that.
Yeah, check. We might have to pull your man card, buddy.
Yeah.
And it's everywhere. Like you said, it's ubiquitous. It's in everything that we do, whether we realize it or not.
It's no fucking wonder that when a woman comes along and goes, you know what, I don't appreciate that, we're like, shut up, because we've had so much of it from every man around us. But we know in that hierarchy, we're not allowed to tell the guys above us to shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Well, it's have you ever seen this one stat where they talk about the percentage of men raised without fathers or with absent fathers, raised by women? Most of the teachers they deal with in school are women, and it's these are the guys who end up struggling, lost, and they commit a lot of the crimes. They're responsible for a lot of the mayhem in community. And these guys raised mostly by women. So it kind of
I have to say, I don't know whether there's data to back that up. Well, President Obama was raised by a woman.
But the point was
go where you want with
that.
Oh,
sorry. No, I was just saying the point being is that it's not that necessarily masculinity is the problem. It's just that we're not being taught how to exhibit it properly.
What is it? I think that one of the things we can do is provide boys and men a sense of belonging. And if you try to do that in the absence of connection, of real, authentic friendship and connection, you can talk all day about, how to behave properly, and it's not going to resonate because it is in that sense of connection with other people. This is why white nationalists have so much attraction to disaffected young men, because they're offering them community.
Yeah.
Your skin color means you're one of us. And once you're one of us, we're family.
And there's no
this idea that
yeah.
Whereas, and that's because these young disaffected young men are coming out of this masculine culture, which isolates them. So I describe it as being like a dog chained up in the back of the yard, right? Mm-hmm. They're just howling all fucking night because they're social creatures. They're meant to be in with the pack, with the humans and with all that. But we're disconnecting boys from connection. We're literally beating it out of them. And then we're surprised that they become white nationalists or incels, or that they become violent or commit crime or whatever it is. It's lack of a circle of meaningful friendships. Ashanti Branch does this work with boys where he brings them into circles and they do their
Taking off the
mask work,
mask.
and
Yeah.
and they communicate and they connect. It's mind-boggling that we don't see this. We're literally cut off from friendship, and we think, yeah, but I got to get to the office. Like, wait a minute. Like, fuck pardon my French during this podcast, but
let them fly. Let them fly. Like I said,
enough with the office already. Okay. Yeah. Enough with the damn office. Enough with the new, Honda Accord or whatever.
Nobody cares about your car. You do fucking jet ski. Like,
it's not going to help you.
Yeah.
When you have your dark night of the soul, right? It's not, the Honda is not going to come in and hold your freaking hand and talk to you. It's not going to happen. But your friends will show up for you. They'll be there, right?
A lot of guys need to be reminded. Hey, listen, the Jets are not going to come save you here. Okay, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Especially the Jets. I don't know how the Jets are doing this year. They may be doing
probably
great.
bad. Probably bad. That's why I can't watch football, because I was raised in a Jets house, and it's like, well, I don't like losing all the time, so I'm just not going to watch football.
I'll tell you, I'll take the Jets over the Giants any day of the week. I'm a New Yorker. I live in New York City, so.
What's even more frustrating to me is that when there are guys like yourself who are literally trying to scream from the rooftops about these things, and people just refuse to listen. They just have their fingers in their ears and they don't want to hear it. It's like, well, this is a problem, and whether you realize it or not, you're going to pay the price. Everyone we know around us is going to pay the price. Our families, our loved ones, our kids,
we love. People we love.
They're the ones suffering from this, not just us.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to pause for 1 sec, and then we're going to do humble pie at the end. And then that's going to be the whole thing. So let me just fix this. Stop that. I don't know why it's doing that, but okay. Memory card. My memory card's telling me I've only got 4 minutes left, but I don't know what that means. All right, anyway. So last part of the show is humble pie. And this is where we share embarrassing stories from our past. Some of them are serious, some of them are silly. Either is appropriate for this. It's meant to be fun, but just to find that commonality, that similarity, that this shit happens to all of us. So nobody's perfect. Nobody's immune from being embarrassed or humiliated. It happens. So I don't. If you have one ready, I have one just in the spirit.
You start, and I'll try to come up with one that's appropriately horrifying.
Yeah, I've been given like more silly ones in the past few weeks. Accidentally shitting my pants at work and stuff like that. You're getting caught moving.
Right.
So this story is a little bit more on the serious side. I was probably around 26 at the time, and I was single. I was talking to a few girls. I wasn't really seriously involved with either. And me and my group of friends, we used to like to go to this place called the Breakfast Club in like Central Jersey. It's an 80s themed dance club. So I was talking to a girl, and I said, hey, you should come with us. We're going to go in a couple weeks. It'd be great. And she said, I have plans. I can't make it. I said, okay, no problem. Lo and behold, I ended up talking to another girl, and I said, hey, you know what? You should come with us because it's going to be a good time. And she said, great, I'd love to. Now, fast forward maybe to the week before, the first girl said, hey, you know what? My plans fell through. I can go now. And I said, oh, great. That's going to be fun. And, I guess I wasn't.
Seinfeld.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't mature enough to just say, I invited someone else. And which is what I should have done, because what ended up happening is we all went, and my friends knew, and they just kind of like, yeah, I mean, I guess I'll try to help you, but this is going to be funny. So we went, and it wasn't a total mess, but at the end of the day, one of the girls' feelings were very hurt, and I had to own up to that. And later on, I reached out to her and I really sincerely apologized, because she was a very nice girl, and nobody deserves that. and it was a little humiliating, I think, for her. And I felt guilty about that. I still carry guilt about that now. And I'm embarrassed, only because I'm admitting it and I'm telling everybody. Like, I could have just kept it to myself and only me and my close friends would have known.
Yeah.
But it's embarrassing because it's not one of my prouder moments. And when I should have just sucked it up in the beginning and admitted, like, all right, listen, I invited somebody else. I could have saved her the trouble, and I could have saved myself, a lot of sleepless nights, tossing and turning, thinking about this. But just as a lesson to guys out there, it's easier just to be honest from the get go. Don't try to be Mr. Cool Guy, with two girls showing up to see you moonwalking across a checkered dance floor. It's not going to work out the way you think.
It's not going to work out.
Yeah.
I dug out an old videotape a couple months ago of my bachelor party from 30 years ago, right?
Okay.
And I know I've done a lot of work to try to get over some shit and be a better person. I mean, I've tried, done my work. So I get this videotape out and I go, oh, cool. The bachelor party, a bunch of my friends that I haven't seen in a while, because I now live in a different part of the country. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. I'll get to see my friends from back then when we were young. How nice. And it was a bachelor party, not like in a bar. We actually went to a friend's lake house and got a bunch of beer and a bunch of food and, whatever people do.
Those are the more fun ones anyway.
Yeah. And, so I'm watching this videotape, right, as people get increasingly intoxicated and we're having our fun. It's a good, really sweet time on one level, but I'm watching this one guy and he's getting a little drunk and then he's getting kind of argumentative and kind of shitty and, and it was me. I'm watching myself in this video and I'm thinking, all these people showed up for your bachelor party and you're being a dick. And I did not like that guy. I saw that guy and I thought, oh man, that's too bad. That is just too fucking bad. And they, you know what? They were used to it. We were lifelong friends. They were like, you're always fucking, don't be a crybaby, Greene, whatever, But I saw in him, I thought, man, I could have done better. I could have done better. My version of what it meant to be a guy could have been more about something else. And it was tough. It was tough.
Tough realization. Yeah. When you look back, it's like, oh, I was it.
If you told me what was on that video, I thought, oh, I'm sure I was funny and we were all funny. I had a good time. And we did some of that. But there were moments when I was like, what are you whining about? Jesus Christ. I mean, these, and so to see yourself, I think to see oneself with the blinders off is sometimes can be really hard. And so we don't do it. We intentionally avoid looking, Yeah. And that's what I came away with. But I'm really cool with who I am now. I got to where I needed to be. And part of it was, I literally, maybe on some level, I didn't trust those guys. I didn't trust myself as a man among men. So I was, wasn't happy with the touch football game calls to a degree that was like not appropriate. Yeah. Right.
Hey, ref, who's paying you? Huh? How much they pay you for this one?
To such a degree. No, man, he touched the ball. And I'm like, oh God, just get some joy, dude. So,
I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear you've grown since then.
Thank God.
Mark, I'm so grateful for you taking the time to talk to me today. We didn't even really cover half the stuff that was on the list, which is, I think, is a sign of a good conversation.
A good monologue. I thank you for letting me just. There's stuff I just want men to hear, and I just plow through it, And
make my job easy.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I'm very grateful. And any guys who want to find a copy of the book, we're at Amazon. You can come to remakingmanhood.com if you want to see some more about it and the other books we've written. And thank you for letting me do my thing.
Hey, my pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you on here. It's nice to actually get to to talk to the guy who wrote the book. I'm going to put links to everything in the show notes. So, and I'll have your links, your social media and your website all underneath your picture right there. So,
well, until we meet again.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Boom. That's it. I hope you guys stuck around. Hope you enjoyed what we got into. I really enjoyed talking to Mark. He's just a fucking nice guy, man, and I enjoyed the conversation a lot. And I hope you guys get something out of it, because it's I don't know how else we can continue to go through our everyday lives without ever encountering this kind of information, these different ideas than what we were probably used to. So, you guys know where to find us, apodamongstmen@gmail.com for any comments, questions, or concerns. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter @apodamongstmen. And you could get this podcast wherever you get your podcast, be it Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, SoundCloud. Amazon Podcasts, that's a thing now. iTunes, I don't know if I said iTunes. Yeah, wherever you get your podcast, you're going to find this one. Just type it in. Pod Amongst Men. A Pod Amongst Men. A Pod Amongst Men. A Pod Amongst Men. A Pod Amongst Men. Yeah, sorry about that. And if you're watching, please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, because that helps us and you can boost us in the algorithms. I don't know why I'm talking so weird, and I apologize deeply, sincerely. All right, guys, that's it. I'm going to get out of here because I'm running on empty right now. Peace.